Hi, I'm Sarah from Positively Parenting, and today I'm talking about reducing overwhelm. And this is a guide specifically for parents of children with ADHD, because we know that children with ADHD have a 50% likelihood of having a parent with ADHD. And unfortunately, I think the parents who have ADHD themselves don't actually get very much support, and I think they probably need a lot more than anyone else. Um, so this is designed really to help out if you are a parent with ADHD, to help you get some tools and strategies in place to help you reduce overwhelm. So you should have downloaded a workbook, which I encourage you to fill in as we go. I'll give you prompts when it's time to fill bits in. So don't worry about it for now, and I'll walk you through it. So essentially, parents who have ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder themselves often have children with ADHD as well. So they have children who have issues with impulse control, who may struggle to focus, who may be extremely hyperactive, and all the other things that come with ADHD. But the parents themselves also have executive function difficulties. So some of the commonest challenges include issues with time management. So individuals with ADHD will often struggle to perceive time, to organise themselves, and may have time blindness. So when you're leaving the house, you might think it's going to take me 5 minutes. Actually, it's probably best to give yourself half an hour, because of all the times that you come in and out of the house forgetting things, or just underestimating how long it actually takes to get your children and yourself out of the house with all the things that you need. And it can become very frustrating because the same thing happens over and over, but our brains can't compute that in quite the same way as a neurotypical brain, and it can be difficult for neurotypicals to understand. It can also be difficult for parents to adhere to routines, to keep track of schedules, and to manage their own time effectively. Parents also can struggle with attention and focus, so maintaining focus on tasks and responsibilities can be a real challenge. And that can lead to difficulties in staying engaged with their children. Focusing on what your children are saying, particularly if your children are very young and they're in that kind of very repetitive age. But we know it's really important for our children to have parents who are present. And there's lots of things, happily, that you can do to help you to be able to focus on your children. Um, it can also be difficult for parents to follow through on parenting tasks and remain consistent in their interactions with their children, particularly when you're trying to implement things like routines for children, which is something I think is a really good thing to help ADHD kids and ADHD parents. It can be really hard to stay consistent with that. So that's something to be mindful of as well. Also, parents with ADHD can really struggle with impulsivity, and that is certainly something that I personally have really, really struggled with. And as a peaceful parent coach, it took me a really long time to actually be able to truly think of myself as peaceful. And I still struggle, to be honest, because impulsivity is one of my biggest challenges. But again, there are things that really, really help, things that help me and lots of other people I've worked with. But it can affect decision making. Parents with ADHD might find it really challenging to resist sort of falling into that impulsive reaction. So when your children are pushing your buttons, it's really, really hard not to kind of just be sucked into that anger that's like really drawing you in. And that can result in situations that can escalate, and it's very difficult to co-regulate with your child when you're also kind of, your impulsive reactions are ramping up, and it can make everything much more difficult. Forgetfulness is also a common symptom, which can impact a parent's ability to remember important details, appointments or commitments that they've made relating to their children's activities and their children's well-being. Emotional regulation, I've touched on this a bit with impulsivity, but that can be really affected by ADHD. So you can have mood swings, intense emotional reactions. Parents with ADHD might also find it challenging to manage their own moods, particularly in really stressful or overwhelming situations. Also, we may have a touch of, or a lot of, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which means that we feel super sensitive to any perceived rejection, whether it's there or not, which can add to our emotional dysregulation. We can struggle with organisation, so difficulties in organising tasks, difficulties in organising spaces can make it really challenging for parents with ADHD to keep your home organised. And that can affect daily routines, it can affect cleanliness, and it can affect the overall structure of the household. And actually, clutter itself can make you feel really quite stressed. I know it does me, but if you could actually see a bit more of my office, you'd see that actually it's not something I'm terribly good at managing. Consistency in parenting. So I've touched on this again a little bit because these all overlap, but establishing consistent parenting strategies and routines is really, really important and really, really challenging for parents with ADHD. And the inconsistency can impact on a child's stability, their sense of safety, and the effectiveness of the things that we put in place to support them. But on the flip side, routines really, really help you too. So if you can establish routines that work for your whole family, and if there is a neurotypical person in your house who can really push to keep them on track, that can be super helpful. Otherwise, use some of the strategies in here to ensure that you're keeping those things consistent. Consistency is the key with all of this stuff. School involvement. So parents with ADHD might find it really challenging to engage with the children's education effectively. They may have struggled with their own education and find it really difficult to understand what their kids are doing. They may feel quite triggered by that as well. Again, that's coming into the rejection sensitivity dysphoria and your own childhood triggers. Parents can find it difficult to communicate with the teachers, to attend parent-teacher meetings, and to assist with homework. And if you do have ADHD kids or kids with extra needs, we do need to advocate for our children. As ADHD parents, we know that school can be really, really hard, definitely more hard than for children with for neurotypical children. So it's really important that we are able to advocate for our children. So if you find that hard, notice that and reach out and get some support to help you do that. Self-care as well, really, really important for parents with ADHD, really, really important for overwhelmed parents, for parents with burnout. But it can be really hard to balance the demands of parenting with ADHD, particularly if you're parenting children with additional needs and giving yourself self-care. It can be hard to struggle, you can struggle to prioritise your own well-being, which will increase your stress and fatigue and will essentially make things harder for your whole family. Relationships can also become really strained. ADHD relationships are more challenging than neurotypical relationships. There's often more sensitivity. There's the sense of not being understood. Your partner may find things that you do difficult, and particularly if you're also advocating again for your ADHD child, things can feel really, really strained. Parents can also, ADHD parents can also struggle with communication difficulties. They can be impulsive, they can forget things that are important to the other person in their relationship. So that can really, really strain relationships within the family unit. The work-life balance can also be affected. So parents with ADHD have to juggle parenting, they may have to juggle work, they may also have to juggle kind of managing the house and maintaining focus, meeting deadlines, staying organised in work and at home can present sort of a lot of hurdles that can be extremely overwhelming for an ADHD parent. And finally, the ADHD tax. So as people with ADHD, particularly in the UK at the moment, we have an NHS which is crumbling and it's really, really hard to get NHS support for ADHD. So that's leading to lots of people getting private diagnosis, having to pay for private medication. Also, once you've had that diagnosis and you want to get onto shared care with the NHS, that can be really, really complicated as well. So, there's a lot more work to do just because you have ADHD. If you need to use access for work schemes, again, there's a lot of paperwork and that's difficult for ADHD people. We can also be taxed with things like forgetting to pay car parking charges, for making late payments, for missing appointments, all sorts of things, crashing cars. I mean, ADHD people are, I think, 4 times more likely to have car accidents, and all of these things cost money. There is a lot of expense associated with being somebody with ADHD, and if your children have ADHD, which is likely, it may also impact them, and they may also be bringing in unexpected costs. So there can be financial pressures as well. But despite these challenges, it's also important to note that parents with ADHD successfully manage parenthood with the right support, with the right coping strategies and the right accommodations. It can be really important to seek professional guidance if you need it, develop effective organisational systems, maintain open communication with the people who support you, with your family, so that they understand how you work and how your children work. And I just want you to take a minute to also think about all the really, really positive things that you bring to different environments that you go into as an ADHD person, because I'm sure they are multiple. You may be bringing sort of extra energy, you may be bringing enthusiasm, you may never give up, you may be extremely creative, you may be an ideas machine. There's so many things that we can bring to the environment that is so different than our neurotypical peers. So yes, there are loads of challenges of having ADHD, particularly when you're a parent, but there's also loads of positives. So what I want you to do now is to have a look at your workbook, and I want you to think of the number one thing that reducing overwhelm will enable you to do. Think carefully about it, because it's going to be your motivator for the next few weeks. Make it a really good one, and write this at the very top of your sheet in the commitment to myself section. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that. Brilliant. I hope you've all done that. Now I'm going to ask you to write down in the first column, so you should have 2 columns in front of you. In the first column, I want you to write down some of the things that you really struggle with as an ADHD parent. And in the second column, I want you to write down the things that you bring to relationships and to different settings, just like we talked about before. So anything you can come up with. I'm going to give you another 3 minutes for that. what is ADHD? ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder or condition characterised by persistent patterns of inattention, hyperactivity and impulsivity that can interfere with daily functioning and development. It commonly begins in childhood and may continue into adolescence and adulthood. I actually don't think it does disappear in adulthood. I think there's some suggestions that there's less ADHD in adulthood than there is in childhood. I actually think that it's more likely that we mask really well as adults, and so therefore we have different coping strategies, which therefore means that ADHD doesn't present and affect us in our adult lives quite so much. But a time when lots of people, especially people I work with, realise they have ADHD is either when they become parents, because the overwhelm and the need for your prefrontal cortex to be working and your executive function to be working really well is, escalated. It's needed so much more because other people need to borrow that from you. And also menopause, because estrogen impacts massively how our dopamine is released, etc. There are definite cyclical patterns in the sort of monthly cycle of women where just before your period, your ADHD can present in a much more challenging way than for the rest of the time, even if you're on ADHD medication. Anyway, there's three main subtypes of ADHD. There's a predominantly inattentive presentation, so that's difficulty sustaining attention, making careless mistakes, forgetfulness, and difficulty organising tasks. There's a predominantly hyperactive presentation, or hyperactive and impulsive presentation, which presents as hyperactivity, impulsiveness, difficulty waiting in turn, and a tendency to interrupt. And then there's a combined presentation, which is the most common. So that is a combination of both inattentive and hyperactive impulsive symptoms. So the first thing I want us to do is to think about our triggers. So we've got both triggers and stressors, which can sort of tip us over the edge as parents. So your stresses could be things like just being too busy, being disorganised, running late, you've got too much in the schedule, your mental load is such. I mean, particularly women, we know, carry a really, really heavy mental load, generally speaking, when they become parents. And interrupted hyperfocus can also really stress us out if we're focusing on something and somebody asks something of us. And then triggers are more things like that come from your past. So you're triggered, something happens in the present and it's triggering something in your past and making you react. This can be present particularly if your child hits an age that you really struggled with as a child. So when your child becomes 7, if you had a particularly hard time when you were 7, you may feel generally a lot more triggered by that child when they're that age. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria can absolutely trigger us, so we can be perceiving rejection where there is none, or we are perceiving rejection, there is some, but we're much, much more sensitive to it, and we might take it much more to heart than other people, and that might trigger us into a reaction. And then there's shame. So many people with ADHD hold so much shame because we feel like we don't fit in. Shame is the mechanism by which humans recognise when they're at risk of losing connection, losing community, and it is a basic human need for us to live in community with each other. If you think back to kind of times when we lived in tribes, and the tribe was the safe place, and if you were ostracized from that tribe, you would not be safe. You'd be left on your own, you'd probably be eaten, or you'd starve to death. You can't survive out in wherever on your own, particularly if you're a child. So we do everything we can to be in that circle. of our tribe to be accepted. And when we recognise that our behaviour or things that we do and say and think is different to that of the majority, we feel shame, because we go, oh dear, that's not an acceptable behaviour. We may be rejected. We need to find a way back in. We mustn't do that again. And that's when your shame comes in. And so you can be really, really triggered by that as things happen now, based on your shame reaction when you were a child. And also fear. So you may be really, really triggered by fear. You feel really scared about, you may have felt really scared as a child, or you may feel really scared about things that might happen in the future. So this is the one time when it's not really related to necessarily the past, but you may be really scared about what might happen to your child if they continue this behaviour, for example, and that might really trigger you into a very strong reaction. So what I want you to do on the worksheet is list 5 times over the past week, month or year where you've got really angry or really upset and acted in a way that you wish you hadn't. So list 5 situations down, and then go back to each of them and reflect on them. Write down some ideas of what you could have done in the situation to prevent spiralling into dysregulation. So if you went back to that situation now, what could you do differently to stop you exploding or going into the freeze response and shutting everybody else out? What could you have done differently, and what could you learn from that in the future? And I want you to do that for your triggers, and then I want you to go on to do it for your stressors. So thinking about the things that might have happened in your past or that might be led by fear, and then going on to think about the things that are just happening in your daily life that are causing overload and stressing you out, and then the extra thing happens and boom. So if you can just think about 10 examples of times when you've overreacted. They could be the same examples, and it could be affected by a trigger and a stressor as well. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes to do that. No, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do that. And if you need to have a bit more time, either come back to it if you're watching live, or press pause and you can do it in your own time and then come back to it. Okay, so hopefully you've sorted your triggers now and your stressors, and you've got a bit of an idea of what things cause you problems. So that's really, really useful knowledge to have. Now, I want to go on to some time management strategies that might help you. I'm going to go through these quite quickly because there's a lot there, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. I can always do further trainings on it if it's helpful. So things that can really help us with time management are things like visual aids. So that could be shared calendars, um, either like online shared calendars or having planners on your wall. You can colour code them, perhaps with different family members or just different types of tasks, which can really help you to see what's going on, and you can just get into a habit of looking across the week, and a few days in advance each day, just to see what you've got coming up. You can also on some phones get a widget thing which can put your next day's key tasks up on your home screen, which I have and I find quite helpful. Just reminds me of things like PE for the girls, and I know that they have to wear certain clothes and go in their trainers, for instance. So that can be a really helpful thing, which means that you don't have to go straight into your calendar first thing in the day, but you know that the things you're going to need to be reminded of are going to flash up as soon as you look at your phone. Um, Breaking tasks into smaller steps. So often we can feel really overwhelmed with big tasks. So, you go into a house and it's completely chaotic. It's, too much clutter. It's a complete mess. People have, the kids have been around. They've had friends. There's mess everywhere. You've cooked them all dinner, and the dinner's everywhere, and it can just feel really, really overwhelming. So at those times, I find it really helpful to break the tasks up into smaller steps. So okay, first I'm going to tackle the kitchen. I'm going to get all of the dirty plates and put them by the sink. That's my first step. Then the next step is to put everything into the dishwasher. That can go in the dishwasher, and everything get washed up that needs to get washed up. Then I can do the surfaces. Then I can move on to XYZ, whatever else needs to be done. Setting timers can be really helpful. I particularly recommend the time timer, which is like a visual timer that helps you see how much time you've got left. And that can help with ADHD kids, but also us as parents, or us as a unit. I often work with my kids with a time timer, and it helps me just as much as them when we're trying to get out the door in the morning, for example. Um, Identifying and prioritising tasks based on urgency and importance is another way to kind of prioritise the tasks that you have. So if you just feel like you've got so much to do and you don't know where to start, by kind of creating a grid, so you draw like a square in the middle of your paper, and you can have like urgent and important, and not important and not urgent, in the four corners, and then you can plot the things that you need to do. So it might be better to do the urgent and important things. Well, they're the things that are going to have to be done first, but then after you've done the urgent and important things, you might look at the urgent and not important and think, actually, maybe I'm just not going to do that. Maybe I'm going to let that one slide, and I'm going to go to the other important things, because if I don't do them today, I'm not going to get them done, and then they'll become urgent. So that's quite a useful way of looking at what you've got to do if you need a bit more help prioritising your tasks. Creating routines is super helpful. If you establish a daily routine for your family, everyone knows what to expect. Everyone kind of works together to get you through that routine. It creates structure and predictability, which is really, really helpful for many people with ADHD in terms of just feeling safe and secure and like what's happening. It's also really, really helpful for our children. It helps us to be more consistent as well, because once we're used to something and it sort of becomes just what you do, we have less opportunity to kind of push against it. So sticking to consistent morning and evening routines really, really helps, and it helps for smoother transitions as well. Using reminders, so digital reminders on smartphones, smartwatches, Alexa, whatever helps you, setting reminders to do important things that you need to do is another thing. Time blocking is a really helpful tool that I've only sort of really learnt about recently. But that's allocating specific blocks of time to different types of tasks. So you group similar activities together to streamline your workflow, so you're not jumping from one thing to the next. That can be really, really helpful. It can also hinder some people if you need that kind of change to keep you motivated, keep you going. But if you're hyper focusing in on something, you probably don't want to then be jumping to something else and interrupting your flow. So once you're in a flow, you want to try and stay in it. So that's how time blocking can really help us. And it helps you to sort of focus on one task at a time to improve your concentration and reduce the likelihood of making mistakes. It's also really good for ADHD people if you look at it in terms of really short chunks of time. So figure out how long you can concentrate for, maybe 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. Block out half an hour chunks of time in your calendar, and then give yourself 5-minute breaks in between, and set the tasks that you want to do in that time in your calendar, and be really strict with yourself. And you'll probably find you get much more done because you're saying, right, for this 20 minutes I'm going to do that and I'm not going to do anything else. And then you don't get distracted by emails, you don't get distracted by, or just put a wash on, or whatever it might be. You're spending 20 minutes and you're doing that thing, whether it be at work or whether it be in your parenting life. Obviously, when our kids need us, we need to go and help our kids, but at other times, if you can use that 20-minute rule, I found it really, really helpful. Okay, so moving on, multitasking. We often think as ADHD people that we are really good at multitasking. In fact, no one can multitask. It's a bit of a myth. But I often find myself multitasking, particularly when my brain is starting to switch off. So I might be sitting talking to somebody and I really need a dopamine hit. So I'm suddenly on my phone trying to do something else, or I'm watching TV and I'm on my phone and I'm trying to do a shop and I'm trying to check my emails and I'm trying to do an Instagram post. And actually, I haven't done any of those things properly and it takes much, much longer. And I haven't enjoyed the TV show that I'm trying to watch. So if you can avoid multitasking, you'll actually be far more productive and you'll also be far less overwhelmed. I set a rule with myself about a year ago to spend a week literally not multitasking at all. Every time I multitasked, I pulled myself back and stopped, and I was so much calmer. Having said this now, I think I'm going to do that again because it's so easy to get back into the multitasking because we're so busy and we feel like we're so busy. But if you can let go of some of that urgency and just bring yourself back in, and if you need to do something else to help you concentrate, that's absolutely fine. Of course you do, you've got ADHD, but use a fidget. Like I've got this fidget's one of my favorites. It's really noisy, so I can't really use it on calls, but it just kind of goes round and round. I've also got a ring with a spinner, which I use a lot of the time in meetings, a stress ball, which I use under my table. I've got a drawer full of fidgets. I love fidgets. So that's a good way. Also, you can move around in your chair, you can tap your feet if that doesn't annoy the people around you. You can get up and stretch, whatever you need to do, but try and stay focused on the thing that you're doing. The next one is delegating responsibility. So you're in a family, right? You can absolutely delegate tasks to family members. You may want to have a family meeting or a huddle to try and figure out what sort of things people want to do. Look at what people are good at, what people enjoy. Try not to just give people rubbish tasks that they don't want to do, because then you're going to be fighting really hard to get them to do it, and it's going to be easier to just do it yourself and you won't be consistent. But if you sort of put all the jobs out and you ask people to pick them, it's quite a fun activity to do, and you can get your kids involved, you can get your partner involved, you can actually show your family how much you're holding in your brain, and they will hopefully want to help out. And if they don't want to help out, then I've got lots of lots of ways to change that as well, but I won't cover that in this training. Technology. There's loads of really great apps and tools designed to help task management. There's also specific ones for ADHD folk like us. So have a look around, see what's available. Some of them are great, some of them are quite frankly a little insulting, and some of them may just take more of your time than they're actually giving. But do explore technology because there are lots of really, really helpful things out there, depending on where your needs are. Give yourself regular breaks. I suggested when I was talking about time blocking about giving yourself sort of 5 minutes every 20 or 20 to 30 minutes. Whether you're time blocking or not, scheduling short breaks during tasks will really help you keep going and maintain focus. And it's really important to try and think about sort of moving physically in that time as well, because that will really help to refresh your brain. Practicing mindfulness is something that doesn't sound like a time management strategy, but actually it really, really can be. It can help you to stay present and reduce anxiety. And when you're staying present while you're doing things, you're you're getting everything that you can from that experience. You're not just sort of letting it pass you by. And I think often people with ADHD can rush through life and not really stop to smell the roses, as it were. So, if you're doing the washing up, if you try and focus on, feeling the warm water and the bubbles and the smells and enjoying the cleanness when things are clean, it can transform that activity into something that's not just dull, or you're not just rushing through it, but you're actually regulating your nervous state so that you're nourishing yourself at the same time. So that can be really helpful. Not easy, and probably something to do if once you've got a bit of a meditation practice or mindfulness practice already embedded. But it can be really, really effective. And then reflection and evaluation. What I mean by this is not just sort of sticking with what you're doing, picking one and just leaving it, but regularly assessing how you're managing your time and working out what strategies are working well for you and adjusting those that might need improvement. It's important for parents with ADHD to be patient with themselves, recognising that developing effective time management techniques, it's hard for everyone. It takes time and it takes experimentation. So don't expect to get it right first time. And that's what I'm hoping the workbook that I've given you is going to help you with, is kind of creating a structure where you can figure out which things work for you, making yourself try them for a consistent period, and then doing that reflecting and evaluating and seeing if it's working. And if it is, great, keep it on. If it's not, maybe try something else, or maybe add something else to your toolkit. Obviously, there's space for seeking support from professionals as well. So ADHD coaches can really help to work with your specific type of ADHD, looking at you particularly and helping with strategies that actually are individualized to you. I also will help with that in my coaching program. But that's more around kind of supporting you as a parent in the family environment, as opposed to specifically you as an ADHD person in your own life. Okay, so what I want you to do now is in your workbook, write down one new time management technique that you are going to commit to. And we'll figure out when you're going to commit to it later on. But for now, I just want you to write down one that you're going to commit to at some point in the next 5 weeks. So I'm just going to give you 30 seconds for that. Okay, so organisation hacks. Um, this is one that I need to work on. Um, okay, so some ideas for sort of keeping your home and your life a bit more organised. Having a daily quick cleanup. So setting aside a short amount of time each day for just a quick cleanup of the common areas, maybe the kitchen, the living room, places where the kids play. Get the kids involved in this as well if you can, but focus on returning the things that are out of place back to their designated places. And that might involve getting somebody who is perhaps neurotypical to help you identify some designated places in the first place, because that's where I really struggle. But if you want to get your family involved, make it fun. I've got some really good ideas and ways that I engage kids with tasks, particularly younger kids. If you can make it a game, you put a song on, it can really, really help to get them involved. And if you can be consistent with that, which we know is hard as an ADHD parent, then you won't be fighting for too long to get them to do it. It just becomes part and parcel of living in your family. Designating drop zones. Now, this is a bit of a game changer for lots of people. How many times do you come back into your house when you've left to go and find your keys or your gloves or your phone or whatever it is that you need when you're going out? How many times when you're trying to leave the house are you running around the house trying to find your keys or trying to find your phone? If you have places, a drop zone where you keep things that you use when you leave the house, keys, bags, perhaps your phone if you're not using it when you're in the house, it can really, really help to ensure that you know where everything is. And you've got to be really, really strict with yourself that you do put the things back in the drop zone. And you may need to sort of, when you notice yourself slipping out of using the drop zone, come back into it again. And if you can have somebody to be a bit of an accountability partner with that, then that can be really helpful. Hooks, trays, baskets can really help to organise and create easy access for those sort of things. Visual reminders, again, can be really helpful to organise yourselves. So visual cues like sticky notes, colour-coded labels or visual schedules can be dotted around your house, placing reminders in prominent locations to help you to remember important tasks. I've actually got a sign on my door, on my front door, which I got the kids to make, which says all the things that they need to remember to take to school, and they've drawn pictures of the things and they've written it themselves. So that is what they now check when they leave the house. And again, we have to really push ourselves to use that. But by using that, we know that we don't forget things. But it takes a lot of practice to get into the habit and consistency to make sure that we're actually doing it. And that's what I mean by it being hard to get started with these things. Chunking tasks. So again, talked about this before, but breaking down larger tasks into smaller and more manageable steps can help us be more organised. Sharing responsibilities with the whole family. Digital tools. So again, technology can be really helpful for organising yourselves. You can create shared grocery lists. You can use Alexas or other smart speakers to just add things to the shopping list as you think of them. You can use alarms or notifications to help you remember important events or chores that you need to do during your day. And also body doubling. So if we really struggle to do certain tasks, it can just really help to have someone with us. So if you need to do something and you really don't want to do it, asking somebody in your house to just be with you while you do it can really help. Or having somebody on the phone that you're talking to while you're doing it can really help. Also with working, there's lots of groups out there who will sort of meet up online, not talk to each other, but just be working on screen together, doing their own thing. So that can be a really motivating thing as well. So what I want you to do now is on your worksheet, just write down one organisation hack that you don't Okay, so stress reduction techniques. Managing stress is crucial for people with ADHD. We do tend to feel it more than our neurotypical peers. So some of my favourite techniques are blocking out time for self-care. So really allocating specific time blocks in your schedule to do your self-care activities, prioritizing activities that really bring joy to you, that you find fun, and things that really relax you. So things that can be really helpful are breath work, meditation, and there's lots of different types of meditation. So if you're not somebody who finds meditation easy, really explore what different types of meditation are there. Breath work can be really fun, and something to focus on if you struggle with focus. Visualizations. For some people with ADHD, like myself, I love a visualization. Really, really find that helpful. For other people, they cannot stand them. Body scans can be really good. Counting breaths, having somebody talking you through why you're doing the meditation. There's so many different types out there. So really, really play with it. See what you like. It might not be easy at first. I spent about a year and a half trying to meditate, going up and down with it and really not knowing if it was the right thing for me. I in fact Googled more times than I care to remember, is meditation, or does meditation work for people with ADHD? And also, is meditation bad for me? Because I felt so horrible after it. And the reason I felt so horrible is I wasn't used to being present. I wasn't used to slowing down. I'd spent my whole life rushing. But actually, what I found as I went through and I did it more and more, and I did it consistently, I did it every day for just sort of 3 to 5 minutes, is that I started to rewire my brain, and I started to get to that calm much quicker. And that has been the key to becoming a self-regulated parent, because now I know what that calm feels like and I know how to get myself there, and I can get there quicker. And that is because I've practiced meditation so much now that I have rewired my brain. So there's something called neuroplasticity, which basically means that we can change, our brains can change. So if we start to activate different brain neurons on a regular basis, and fire them with other neurons. So when they're starting to link, so when you're going from that kind of going into your self state in your brain, and then you're starting to feel calm, those neurons that are creating those feelings are firing together. And as you continually do that, and you turn on these neurons, and you turn on these neurons, and you turn on these neurons, as they fire together, they start to wire together, and that becomes an automatic thing. When you go into that meditative state, you go into that calm. So when you're feeling really, really frustrated, you can go into that calm much quicker by using cues, like taking deep breaths, for instance. So you told me 5 years ago, take some deep breaths. I'd be really angry. I'm a very impulsive ADHD person. And I would find that extremely annoying if you told me to take some deep breaths. Still might annoy me if you told me to take some deep breaths, but something in my brain is going to go, oh, hang on, actually, that's a really good point. And then if I do it, I know that it's going to work. And actually, frequently, my daughter will tell me to take some deep breaths. And that's brilliant, because, I do feel that surge of annoyance. And then I'm like, oh yeah. And she's seeing that. And it's so powerful. So I really, really recommend working through it if it's hard. It is worth it. Another type of meditative exercise, which is quite good for people with ADHD, is progressive muscle relaxation, where you tense every muscle and then you slowly relax them. So yeah, have a look at that as well. There's loads of free apps. There's loads of free things you can find on YouTube in terms of different types of meditations to explore. So have a good look. Prioritizing tasks. When you identify and prioritize tasks, focus on the most important ones first. So break tasks down into small, manageable steps, so that things feel less overwhelming. And using tools and apps can really help with that. so that can help you just feel less overwhelmed and less stressed. Setting reminders again, and alarms for important events and activities. Regular exercise or physical activity. It doesn't need to be sort of full-on exercise if that's not your thing, but just going out for a walk or doing some yoga or dancing with your kids. All of that will increase your the oxygen in your body. It will reduce stress and it will improve your mood. Journaling. It's basically free therapy, so why wouldn't you? I mean, I know why you wouldn't, because it's an effort and you've got to find time for these things, but journaling can really help you to sort of work out what you think about things. Mantras can be super useful as well. So when you're feeling stressed, when you're starting to get really annoyed with people, using mantras like "it's not an emergency" or "this is hard, anyone would find this hard, I can handle this." That's actually using some self-compassion techniques as well in that one. There's loads of mantras, and I really recommend sort of trying to find some mantras that work for you, so you can sort of talk yourself off the cliff. Positive affirmations can also be really useful to foster a positive mindset. Focus on strengths and accomplishments to boost your confidence. And then connection is a basic human need for all of us, for you as well as your kids. So, creating a network around you to support you can really help to reduce your stress. Delegating tasks and responsibilities to family members, as I mentioned before, or seeking external help can be really useful, obviously, if you can make that work for you. Try and communicate openly about your needs and share the workload if you can. And then finally, I just want to talk very briefly about self-compassion and mindful acceptance. So if you can practice trying to accept situations that you can't control, focus on adapting to challenges rather than feeling overwhelmed by them, it can help to sort of it can just help to reduce your overwhelm. We spend so long thinking about how we might be able to change something, or can we change this, and sort of fighting against what's inevitable. If we can just accept, then we can move on to the solution. So, the school calls you and says you need to pick up your child from school because they're sick. Rather than feeling stressed out about it and, trying to figure out what you could do to change the situation. You can't change it, it's happened. Accept it and deal with it. And don't waste energy on what you can't change. And in terms of self-compassion, the sort of three core pillars of it are mindfulness, common humanity, and being kind to yourself. So in the quote that I used before, I was sort of starting with mindfulness, in the mantra, I was starting with mindfulness, and I was recognizing that this is a hard moment. Then I was going into the common humanity, so I was placing myself not just in the moment on my own, but there are other people out there who are going to be finding this hard too. So this is hard. Anyone would find this hard, and other people are finding this hard. And I can handle this. I've got this. I believe in myself, and that is the kindness to yourself piece. So it can be a much longer and slower practice, but you can also sort of practice it in those short mantras, and that can really support you. So remember that finding the right combination of techniques is going to take some experimentation. Being consistent with it is key, and it's okay to look elsewhere for professional support or therapy, counselling, to develop your own personalised stress management strategies. This is just a kind of brief overview of the things that you can do, but if you're finding this particularly difficult and you're in overwhelm, do seek professional support. So what I'm going to do now is write your one stress reduction technique that you are going to commit to in the next few weeks. In your worksheet, and again, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. So seeking support. So there's lots of different types of support out there, but often we don't support each other ourselves as much as we might support others. And I really encourage you to just spend some time now thinking about what support you need and what support you have. So some suggestions here. So I've got a Facebook group called My Parent Village, which supports parents of what we might call extra kids to go from extra to extraordinary. Lots of people in that group are ADHD. I'm ADHD. So there's support there. There's also free trainings on parenting and with anything that you might need help with. And I'm also on there and can answer questions, etc. So please join that. There's other Facebook groups around ADHD parenting, so you may find some community there. Instagram, if you follow people that lift you and build you and help you learn about being an ADHD person in this time of life that you're in. Some of them are really humorous, some of them are really educational. I find that really helpful, but it's really key to sort of create it so that it's feeding you good information that's making you feel good and not rubbish that's making you feel bad. Networking with other parents could be really helpful, and also sort of reaching out to neurotypicals as well, who might be able to support you with things that you find difficult. So on your worksheet, try and identify what support you need, and write down at least one thing that you're going to do to give yourself a bit more support. And this is the only one that I say you can write more than one if you want to, because I don't think you can never have too much support. So I'm going to give you a minute to put that. Okay, so we're on to our last slide. So the one thing I really want you to take away from this is that ADHD is not a bad thing. I know that we have spent a lot of time talking about the things that are challenging for parents with ADHD, but we also bring so much. So I really want you, I asked you at the beginning to look at what things you bring to the table, and I want you to think about that for the next couple of months. Think about what you're bringing, what unique thing you're bringing to your family, and start to develop that sense of an acceptance of yourself, because I'm sure you're doing a really great job. I haven't seen each of you individually, but I know that if you're even on this training, you care deeply about your family. So give yourself a pat on the back and appreciate yourself. It's really important that we put on our own oxygen masks first, or fill our own cups. We cannot pour from an empty cup. So when we, are doing to do for other people and meet the needs of our family, if we're not meeting our own needs, it's no wonder that we're becoming burnt out. It's no wonder that we feel overwhelmed. We need to take some time for ourselves. So, really do think about what you can do for yourself, and it's not selfish. It's good for your family. It's good for you. It's good for everyone. We talked about time management, we talked about organisation, we talked about stress reduction, and we talked about creating your network of support. In the workbook, you'll see that I've kind of scheduled it out so that you choose one thing each week to introduce. We want to take small steps. Finding the right combination of techniques is going to take experimentation. Consistency is going to be really important. So do it one by one, slowly adding things on so that you embed each idea. And then after you've gone through all of the different things that you've put down as your list, I want you to spend a week reflecting on that, reflecting and thinking about which ones worked, which ones maybe didn't work, and then looking at the other things that you might have ticked as other useful things and adding them into a plan for the following 7 weeks. So kind of just resave the form and put it as kind of phase 2 or something, delete the things that you put in before, or keep them in if you're going to keep them, and just put what else you are adding from the things we've talked about. And keep going for as long as you need to, and just slowly introduce these different things. And I really hope that you'll be able to implement and reduce your overwhelm. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Lauren O'Carroll from Positively Parenting. You can find me at www.positivelyparenting.co.uk, or head over to Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, I am Positively Parenting Together, and on Facebook, just search for Lauren O'Carroll Positively Parenting and you'll find me there. Thanks very much for watching. Take care.